op-ed columnist, political analyst Kirsten Powers, a USA Today columnist, political commentator Ana Navarro. Frank, you just heard that. What did you think?
I'm just as stunned as you are, Don, by this notion that Republicans down there are explaining it away or saying that even if it's true, it's really not so bad, it was so long ago. But, that brings up a very interesting question and point. In another state, at another time, you would assume that Roy Moore was over, that this was the end of the road. I'm not at all sure that this will cost him victory in this. It's a much more complicated situation, and what he's doing, what he's saying is, if you're holding the hand of cards that he's holding, it's probably the right thing. He's saying this is the institutional media rearing its head. I'm going up against all those forces that you've heard our president, talk about and malign, and I'm an underdog here. And it's going to be really interesting to see how voters in Alabama respond to that.
I want you guys to listen to this is Steve Bannon, what Steve Bannon said tonight. Watch this.
But it's interesting. The Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post that dropped that dime on Donald Trump is the same Bezos, Amazon, Washington Post that dropped the dime this afternoon on Judge Roy Moore. Now, is that a coincidence? That's what I mean when I say opposition party, right? It's purely part of the apparatus of the Democratic Party. They don't make any bones about it.
Dropped the dime on Moore and Trump. I mean, Trump wasn't a victim. He admitted on tape. The tape said exactly what he said. Bannon tonight comparing the accusations against the GOP Senate nominee to the media coverage of the Access Hollywood tape. What's your reaction to that?
First of all, I see the game that Steve Bannon is trying to play. He's trying to make this into an establishment Republican versus Trump Republican type of thing. He's trying to make Roy Moore a victim. That could not be further from the truth. This should not be establishment Republican versus Trump Republican. This should be decency. This should be consistency. This should be legality. This man, Roy Moore, one of the things that bothers me most about this story is the hypocrisy of this man who has been going around thumping a Bible and maligning homosexuals. He is a homophobe. He is a racist. He is a bigot who has spoken against Muslims. He thinks Muslims should not be allowed to serve in Congress. Well, you know what? I think a child predator should not be allowed to serve in Congress. That's what we should all be outraged about today. This is not about a civil war within the Republican Party. This is about basic decency and morality. And we should not fall prey, nobody should, for what the game that Steve Bannon is trying to play again and again. How low can our standards go?
Kirsten, how should the White House react to this? Because tonight, I'm going to tell you, this is what tonight the White House official urged caution, okay, about the Moore allegations, but said, quote, if true, then yes, there is no path forward. Okay, and this is the same White House, that we heard from during the Access Hollywood tapes. At least it was the campaign then, and some of the same people are there. But how do you think the White House should respond? Scott Jennings just said the president should come out and say he needs to step aside.
Well, of course. I think that any decent person thinks that that's what should happen, but we have to also think about who the president is and think about the fact that Republicans obviously didn't have a problem with the, more than a dozen accusations against him. And so the idea that somehow they're going to care about accusations against Roy Moore, I don't know why people think that these voters are going to end up caring. We see the kind of statements that are coming out of elected officials in Alabama. I mean, really disturbing things. Even, some people suggesting that there's just actually nothing even wrong with dating somebody who's 16 or 14 when you're 32 years old if you're not a married man. So, I think that they've made a calculation that that the voters aren't going to care. Now, look, the reality is that the race is a lot tighter than it should be. He's only up by about 6 points, and Donald Trump won the state by 28 points. Yeah. So I think it remains to be seen whether or not it'll hurt him or not, but I think Anna's right. He's playing the victim, and he's trying to convince people that he's waging this sort of holy war, and he has this evangelical base that's probably going to stay behind him.
A 30-year-old man and a 14-year-old. I got to get you in here, Frank, because and let me read this. Daniel Dale, you just heard, he was on. And he told me about local Alabama politicians, how they are responding. They're sticking behind Moore. This is what the state auditor, he spoke to the Washington Examiner, and he said this about Moore, okay? He is clean as a hound's tooth. Take Joseph and Mary. Mary was a teenager and Joseph was an adult carpenter. They became parents of Jesus. There's just nothing immoral or illegal here, Ziegler concluded, maybe just a little bit unusual. And the reason I ask that, right, I'm not to, just sort of beat a dead horse here, but in recent weeks, and we have talked about this, Frank, you've seen immediate and swift consequences from allegations about Harvey Weinstein, about Kevin Spacey, about Mark Halperin, and others. Why do you think that it is different in the world of politics?
I think we have become, part of the answer is we've become so partisan that you look for any sort of rationalization, you look for any sort of excuse to be able to hold on to the candidate who's a member of your tribe. That's part of what's going on here. But it's interesting, I'm glad you mentioned all of those other cases, all of those other men, because, Steve Bannon is planting the notion that this is only coming out now because the election is almost around the corner and this is a classic, Democratic or media trick. This is coming out now because women are coming forward now. I have to assume that a lot of what set this in motion and brought this to the Washington Post's attention and facilitated what was incredibly thorough and persuasive reporting is the fact that women are speaking up. They're feeling emboldened when they didn't feel emboldened before. And so if you want to talk about timing here, that's as good an explanation for why we're hearing this story now and not during previous candidacies of Roy Moore as any sort of dirty trick by the media or by Democrats. We run stories, you know this as well as any of us, Don. We run stories when we have them. This is when the Washington Post nailed down the story, and this is a very disturbing story. You can talk about Mary and Joseph all you want, it doesn't change a thing. Yeah,
so listen, this is what the Post says. Neither Korfman nor any of the other women sought out the Post. While reporting a story in Alabama about supporters of Moore's Senate campaign, a Post reporter heard that Moore allegedly had sought relationships with teenage girls, and then over the ensuing weeks, they talked about who they spoke to, all four women, and they were reluctant to speak publicly. What do you think, Anna? Is this a left-wing conspiracy against Roy Moore?
It's not. Look, one of the writers of the story is Beth Reinhard. She used to be at the Miami Herald. I know her from there. She also was at the Wall Street Journal before going to the Washington Post very recently. Beth spent 2 weeks in Gadsden, Alabama, researching this story. And one of the very smart things they did, first of all, every woman is on the record. The woman's mother is on the record. And one of the smart things they did, is the one who was 14 years old says, look, nobody's going to ever accuse me of being a saint. They go and they talk about her bankruptcies and her divorces so that it's not brought out against her. She brought it out herself. This is about hypocrisy. And one of the things that should really bother the people of Alabama, who I hope make the right choice if this guy stays in the race, is that when this happened, he was a prosecutor. He was an officer of the court. And after that, he went on to serve as a judge. He was judging other criminals when he himself had issues that should have been putting him in jail had it been, within the statute of limitations. So the hypocrisy of this man, look, the one Republican vote is not worth cheapening the Senate and the institution to the level of having to admit a man who is a sexual predator. Not now, when women are speaking up. The women in Alabama cannot allow this to happen.
Yeah. Kirsten, what are the chances that Moore steps aside or the people of Alabama elect someone else if he stays in the race?
Well, I don't think he's going to step aside. You can already see the way people are rallying around him. You look at what Steve Bannon said. Sean Hannity has come out and said a lot of troubling things in support of him as well. So, and even if he steps aside, I don't think there's nothing. It's not like anybody can really replace him. So, I don't think he'll step aside, and I think probably he'll win, but like I said, the race is unusually close for a race in Alabama. He should be up by much more, and he's already a very controversial person, even separate from this. So, because of that, he could be in trouble. But otherwise, I think he would probably be fine if he wasn't already so controversial.
And Don, there's a reason why you're not seeing Democrats, why you're not seeing Chuck Schumer and other Democrats out there beating the drums on this. They might actually want him to win. Do you know how badly they're going to beat up the Republican Party? The Republican Party is going to be known as what? The party that looks the other way and turns a blind eye when it's about sexual predators and sexual harassment, just as long as we can get a Republican in office? That's shameful.
Yeah. And give Mary and Joseph analogies. So, we're going to continue to cover this, but I've got to ask you, Frank, and it's so good that we have you here, and you're a fairly new contributor to CNN, because I want to ask you about a legend, and I know it's a hard turn here, but you were once a chief restaurant critic for the New York Times, and before this news broke today, we were going to have you on to talk about this new Jeremiah Tower, the show, The Last Magnificent, that's airing on Sunday night. I want to play a clip, and then I want to get your response.
Sure.
Most people would not know who Jeremiah Tower is. And sadly, he certainly is considered, in my book anyway, a father of the American cuisine.
1972, Jeremiah Tower walks into Chez Panisse. Everyone, reluctantly or not, have to agree that he put the place on the map. Jeremiah Tower's menus made Chez Panisse the place that everybody wanted to go.
Wow, what else are we going to learn about this legend?
Well, I mean, a guy with a really, really interesting life, but the main thing that you're going to learn is that there was this towering, forgive my wordplay with his surname, this towering figure in American culinary history who probably has as much to do with some of the food vogues and the way we eat in restaurants today as anybody else. And yet, because he was a celebrity chef just a little bit before the time of the celebrity chef, he has somehow kind of been erased from history books. And it's a very interesting documentary because it's a correction of the record, and it's a filling in of history that I think was long overdue.
Thank you, Frank Bruni. I appreciate that, and thanks to Anna and Kirsten as well. Jeremiah Tower, The Last Magnificent. It airs this Sunday at 9 p.m. on CNN. And just ahead, a number of powerful men accused of egregious sexual misconduct. Why do they act out in an aggressive sexual manner against women? Well, we'll try to get some answers from the experts. That's next.